minute, but I'll wait till we hit 7 and then I'll give everybody a heads up and I'll hit the start webinar button.
Good to know.
So it hit 7 o'clock. So in 3, 2, 1, I'm hitting the button. Welcome, everyone. We'll just wait a moment as folks continue to join us this evening. Welcome, and thank you all for being here on this glorious spring evening. I see our participant numbers rising, so we'll give it a minute for everyone to get settled. Welcome, and on behalf of the Ridgefield Library, I'd like to welcome you this evening. My name is Andy Forsyth, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Ridgefield Library. We at the library are so happy to partner with Throne Stone Theater Company to present tonight's program, Meet the Playwrights. It's my pleasure now to tell you a little bit about our host for this evening, Colton Harris. Colton is a creative visionary leader, educator, facilitator, and multidisciplinary artist, currently serving as a program manager at the Connecticut Office of the Arts. In addition to his work as artistic and executive director of a social justice youth theater, he is a recording artist, a musician, actor, and writer. Welcome, Colton. Welcome, everyone, this evening, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Andy. What's up, everyone? Welcome to this exhilarating conversation. I'm grateful to be in the space, and I hope that you feel grateful to be here as we're living, creating, and existing together. I have the honor of sharing space with these incredible voices and these artists who have been commissioned to create a unique piece of work that we are going to just discuss a little bit. And tonight, anticipate conversation around process, around the work, around identity, and how that influences the ways in which these artists have individually as well as collectively come together to shape and create the suburbs. Want to let everyone know that throughout our conversation, if you have questions or things that you would like to say, use the Q&A feature to just type it in there and we'll get to it in our Q&A section. All right, so let's dive in. Are y'all ready? I imagine a stadium making noise, right? All the fans are excited. So would love to just start off with just going around and let's just hear a little bit from our panelists. And if you could just tell us your name, where you're based, and what your role is in this process. So I'm going to start with Catherine.
My name is Catherine Yu. I'm a New Yorker based in Chicago, and I'm a writer on the project.
Incredible. All right. Vanessa?
Hi, my name is Vanessa. I'm from Miami, Florida, and right now I'm based in Barefoot Bay, or Brevard County, and I'm a writer on this project.
Tony?
Hi, Tony Meneses. I am also a playwright. I am based in Hoboken / New York City, and from Albuquerque and Dallas. I'll throw that in there too.
Amazing. All right, Khulud, over to you.
Thank you, Colton. I am Khulud Sawaf. I am originally from Damascus, Syria, and I am based in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and I am the director of the project.
Incredible. So this is our team. And so what I'd like to do is just have a conversation about the process, about the art itself, and then a little bit about your journey and your identity as it is embedded in the work, and talk about maybe some challenges as well as some victories throughout the process. So I'll kind of open this up. If I could just hear a little bit from everyone, how were you approached about this project, and what were your initial sort of thoughts or instincts? Did it really catch your imagination and your attention, or was it strange to you? And yeah, just tell us a little bit about that. So what we can do is, we're just having a bit of conversation, so we'll kind of let it flow. So I'll call on folks for some questions, but other ones you can just, if you feel compelled, to share first. So anyone like to dive in and just take yourself off mute and let us know how you were approached for this project, and what were some initial sort of thoughts and reactions?
I'll dive in first. I think I was the first playwright approach, so that was start the domino conversation, perhaps. So yeah, I mean, I just got a random email from Jonathan Lynn one day. He had read some of my work and reached out about this project, and obviously we're still in the thick of COVID, and all of us curious / desperate about when we could play together and make theater together. So he approached me with this idea of doing an outdoor performance that's collaborative with other pieces, and sort of the theme of the suburbs, and how it would the performance would travel from spaces to spaces in Ridgefield. So to me, just got really exciting, to work again, and to create again, and to collaborate again with others. Obviously, it's been a bit of a spell since that's happened. And then, yeah, so I was the first one on board. I signed off immediately. I think in that first conversation, I didn't even think about it. I was like, let's do it. Sounds fun. And then from there, I was sort of folded into the other collaborators that were also beginning to be part of the process as well from then on.
I owe Tony a thank you, because he referred me to the project. So Jonathan emailed and asked to read a few of my plays, and then told me about the project, and I thought it was really exciting, and had the same reaction as Tony, and signed on after that conversation.
That's great. So the intersections, all right, yeah, go ahead, Vanessa.
Oh no, I was just gonna jump in and say, I have to thank Talia Hankin, because she was an intern for Thronestone, and they were searching for the third playwright, and then she was just like, okay, can I send you this person's script? Jonathan's like, okay, I don't know what you're gonna send me. And then, he reached out to me, and it was really cool. So yeah, I really like the idea for the project, and I studied urban studies in school, so conversations around the suburbs, and what does it mean to live in the suburbs, and who gets to live in the suburbs. I mean, it's a conversation I I was in for 4 years. So I thought it was really cool to be able to write a play about that.
That's really great.
I think my story getting on the project was a little funny and unusual, actually, in a great way, because me and Jonathan were attending like an event for an NPN, National New Play Network, I think that's what the shortcut for. And we you do this sort of like speed dating for professional connections, so you get to like be put in a room for 5 minutes with someone else, and we were just in a room together, and we started talking, and he started telling me about this project, and then we connected some more. I had just done curbside theater, which was outdoor theater inspired by the pandemic, and I was also commissioned to do another site-specific work. So I think the conversation got going, and that's how I got on the project.
Amazing. So it's like this web of connections and folks knowing about work and in the different spaces in which we sort of intersect and meet. And so Tony, you mentioned a little bit about how you were first approached, and then it kind of launched into this collaborative process. Could you all just talk a little bit about what was the collaboration like? What was the extent of it? And how was that sort of done in the midst of a pandemic, as well as the fact that you all are clearly from different spaces? So Tony, maybe you could start a little bit, and then whoever else wants to jump in and talk a little bit about what was it like to collaborate.
Yeah, I mean, originally it just raised so many questions of like, well, what is this going to look like? 3 playwrights on one project. Are we all, working on each other's stuff? Are we going to be in conversation? How thematically or content wise we're going to be reflecting each other's work? Which is a little daunting at first because most of us have a healthy sense of ego and it's like, no, I want to work on my own thing and I don't want to have to compromise my vision, all this sort of artistry talk that we get to indulge in sometimes. But it was really, really just like great to sort of figure out what this looked like and just the creative freedom that we all had on our own to sort of do what we wanted. There were certain things that we had to kind of divvy up, what space we wanted, I think what time period we were looking at too, in terms of exploration, so that, it was all healthy collaboration. We all kind of just like spoke up for the things that we were excited by. But yeah, for the most part, it's been fun to sort of see the plays now that they're all written and see sort of echoes and glimmers of things that we all discussed early on when we met on Zoom throughout the process, and sort of seeing it now in fruition has been really exciting. So I'm just excited when we get to workshop the pieces together and just see how they're all kind of kinesthetically alive together. That's sort of the next phase that I'm most excited about.
That's really great. And Khalud, I would love to ask you, when you were sort of approached to step in as a director, what was your role, I guess, in this collaborative process of kind of being embedded with these dynamic playwrights and having your own journey as well? Like what was that experience like for you, and what was your approach, I guess?
I think we're still finding it together, which is a great thing. I think we started having conversations. We started having regular meetings and connecting. What is everyone thinking? What sort of, what do you see? Who do you see? What do you hear? Sort of conversation. It's finding that balance between someone who often does site-specific work in a very devised process and working in a traditional new development kind of way, and having scripts and then working on them. And what does that mean when you put them in an outdoor space? So I think we're really finding it together. And I'm, like Tony, really excited about the next phase where we get to be in, workshopping them and unpacking them and finding that connection physically or viscerally even between the plays. And I think connecting them, like both thematically, which the words take care of, and the work of the playwrights, but also how can I also do something that connect them, whether that's visually, whether that's like how do you set something up, whether that's how do you lead the audience on the journey. So that's really what I'm excited about in our next phase in the workshop.
That's really great. And Catherine, I would love to ask you, when you were brought onto this project, where did you start? What was your starting point when you sort of got the concept and the idea? How did you dive into your process?
I think it was by chance. There was an article in the New York Times about a classic scholar, and he was a scholar of color. And we didn't know how it would connect to the other 2 pieces, but Jonathan and Jason said, just go with it. So I did a lot of research on antiquity and then started a story that could somehow connect to the suburbs and Ridgefield's history, and went from there.
That's really great. And so you're kind of getting a little bit into sort of thematically and from a narrative standpoint, sort of your approach. And just to sort of kick it over to Inesia, in addition to your sort of process, right, that you normally take, what was different about your approach in this project than maybe it typically is with work that you're normally working on?
I think when it comes to commissions in general, the difficulty is kind of like, when you're alone in your room and it's like no one is asking you for this play, you can kind of just be like, great, no one's asking for it, then I'm gonna do whatever. But then sometimes for me, in my experience, I feel pressure because I'm thinking, okay, well, I want to make the theater company proud. I also have this deadline. I'm also living in this world like everyone else, so things in life are popping up. So it becomes it definitely becomes you have to, what I've found is I have to find ways to play, and I have to force myself out of that mentality, and I have to create the same type of fun and figure out devices or different things to excite me that I have when I'm not, on a deadline, or when I'm not on commission, where I'm, kind of just in my room writing for myself, and then 3 months later I'm like, oh, this is a play. It's not just notes that I wrote down for myself. That's kind of been my process as of yet. But I really have appreciated the process because it's shown me how quick I can turn edits around, or how quick I can work on the piece. And this is my second commission. The first one, I had a similar experience where I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm gonna do it. I just don't know how. I'm Haitian. That's how we are. We're like, it's gonna happen. We just don't know how. So that's essentially what's been happening with this piece. And every time I turn and edit, I'm even more excited. And I think what I was especially confused about is, how am I gonna write about an experience that I don't necessarily know? I'm not from Ridgefield. So how am I going to develop a relationship with this place? And thankfully, I was able to come. I stayed at the gorgeous West Lane Inn, and I was able to walk around and meet people and even talk to people. People were so nice and let me interview them and have conversations with them. And that was really helpful, as well as um, Jack Sanders. He's been sending me so much information. He's a local historian, and he's been giving me all of these resources. So all of that put together, it actually, I had all the resources. I just had to believe that I had them.
Yeah, it's really great. And so as we're sort of getting into the conversation around process, I would love to hear a little bit from y'all. When you were approached about the project, what was the challenge, right? Because the suburbs, it's clearly about creating these stories that have to do with Ridgefield and the word suburbs. So what was the sort of exact prompt or commission, and how did that differ from sort of, I guess, the final product that is still, of course, evolving? But yeah, were you given a prompt, or was there a challenge that you were sort of initially sort of given? And anyone can feel free to jump in on this one.
I think for me, ironically, it's the form of it. It's a 15-minute play, so we're more used to writing full lengths, which range up to like 60 to 120 pages, depending on the scope of it. So though it sounds, like, oh, a 15-minute play, you could do that really easily, it actually is a lot harder because you just have less page length and count to cram in story and events that you want to get to. So it's an incredibly daunting thing to sort of contain an entire world, especially with characters in such a short amount of space. So that for me felt like, I don't want to mess that up. I don't want to sort of write something superficial that isn't digging at something and doesn't have anything to say. And the second challenge for me is just, in the year that we've been in, with a lot of real world events happening to all of us, it's like, well, what do I have to say as an artist and want to say, and what kind of experience do I want an audience to have? What kind of experience is the audience going to want to have too? And Colton, you alluded to like joy earlier. For me, that was like my number one MO, was like, I want this to be joyful, literally colorful, effervescent. I just want the audience to have a good time while still, sneaking in some stuff that, needs to be said and needs to be acknowledged about the world that we're in, and packaged in that way. But I just, though it may seem perhaps a little bit not too intellectual, but I really want the audience to have a good time with this experience. And I think they will, because it's going to be a unique theatrical experience with all three pieces and how they're going to exist.
Great. So the sort of the context was, hey, Ridgefield is a setting in the space. You divvied up locations and then time periods, and then were you then given sort of creative freedom to construct whatever sort of narrative and characters, and then now the process is working with Kalu to sort of put them all together? Is that fair to say that that's what sort of the commission was? Great. And so as you were thinking through your approach, or what stories you wanted to tell, Vanessa, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about, in your approach, what voices or stories did you feel really inclined to lead with in terms of the way that you approached your segment?
Well, Jonathan and I had a lot of conversations because my plays, most of them are experimental. They deal with dreams, memories. We go back and through time, or we travel through dreams. And I'm really interested in Afrofuturism and figuring out what that means to me. And Jonathan was like, "That's so cool." And I really appreciated that because I was like, you know, killing, two. Oh, I guess we're not. I think we're not supposed to say killing two birds with one stone. Killing two, killing two plastic bottles with one recycling bin. I'm able to explore Afrofuturism in this piece, but also get this really cool and unique opportunity to write about this really incredible city. I mean, when I came to Ridgefield and I was walking around and I saw museum on the streets, I was able to see, wow, this is such a, you know, this is a gem in American history, and it's complicated, has a complicated history. And I talk about the complication because I'm talking about the Black history of Ridgefield, and one of Ridgefield's greatest heroes, who, thanks to Jack Sanders, is getting, there are conversations being had about him, but perhaps there could be more. So I don't want to get too much into it because I hate spoilers, so I don't want to spoil anything for anyone. But I will say that it felt really awesome because one of the things I've been very passionate about for the past years, I think playwrights of color, we get placed into. August Wilson is the Black playwright, right? Maria Irene Fornes is the Latina playwright. We don't get to just be great American playwrights, great playwrights who lived in America and contributed to the American theater and also the global theater scene. I feel like that is not fair. And with this opportunity, I feel like, I'm able, it's very canonical to specifically be writing about Ridgefield, and to be in this place. So yeah, I feel like I I feel like I answered your question, but I went to a different space, but because I got really excited.
No, it'd be beautiful. I love traveling to those beautiful spaces. And so with that, would also just like to now shift and continue in that direction that you were going, and really ask Khulud, in your sort of approach to this process and thinking about your lived experience in relation to Ridgefield. Before this experience, what was your knowledge of Ridgefield? Did you know that Ridgefield existed, and did you get a chance to sort of exist in the space, or is that coming for you?
Nothing at all before being put on this project. Nothing at all. But since then, I've had great conversations with Jonathan, and he provided a lot of resources. It's also been really great to engage with the work and the conversations with the playwrights. I haven't been into the space just yet, and I'm eager to do that. And I'm really looking forward to see how does the space influence the work and infuses it and feeds it and theatricalizes it. And we've been, we've for like 14 months now, we've been all in those screens, and those are great and very accessible and wonderful. But once you get to a big space and something so open in the air, that could be, if you have created for something that is so screen based, you worry about that. So I'm really looking forward to that process. I'm really looking forward to engage with the space and to engage with the environment and to get to meet the people there, and to put together with the fantastic playwrights and with this fantastic company and the amazing sites and their leaderships to put together an entertaining evening, and that hopefully also has a message to say, as to uplift what Tony said, as well as other the playwrights. All I'm sorry, I'm sick, so I don't sound this weird usually.
You sound phenomenal. You gave away the secret. I think everyone was wondering, how can I sound more like that? So I appreciate, thanks for still being here with us. No, that's great. And speaking of message, Catherine, just want to pick on you for a minute and just ask you, throughout your process as you were researching and creating and writing, how did you sort of channel the message that you really wanted your segment to communicated? And was that clear to you early on? Is it clear to you now? And yeah, if you just want to talk a little bit about message.
Sure. I had to search for the message. I'm not usually someone who starts with an answer, but I grew up in a suburb similar to Ridgefield in New York. So I drew on that experience and thought about like, what would it be like to go through a school system like the one I went through, but comparable in Ridgefield? And what would it be like if I become an academic? Just like the character in the play. And I just went from there, also combining it with the experience of the actual classic scholar who was interviewed and who was like shaking up antiquity and things like that. So it was a lot of fun.
That's great. So you found sort of this through line that was non-linear, but it did channel your own experiences with this research and thinking about what it looks like and means to shake up antiquity and sort of reimagine and redefine how we look at things. And then also this real life sort of story and example. Tony, as you were sort of going through your process, as you said, you really centered joy and making the audience really have a good time. In terms of your research or your inspiration, where were you pulling from as you were creating?
I mean, I think what's always important to me is just in anything that I do is just like, what is the aesthetic value that I always want to bring to every piece? So, Vanessa alluded to Afrofuturism in terms of her aesthetic choice. I often describe my work as Mexicovian. I'm really influenced by Chekhov and sort of the working class characters that are showcased there. And sort of, I mean, when I see those Russians, I see Mexicans, to be honest, and that's just who I grew up with. Channeling cultural, intersections and sort of exploring like, well, those are usually people that I write are working class people. And obviously in a suburban environment, I think we get distracted so much by perhaps, the means that are available to certain people there, but obviously working class people are there too. So I was interested immediately in telling that story. It's like, well, all right, it's a suburb, but who works here? Like, and where are they coming from to work here? So I was immediately arrested by that idea. I just wanted to show that. And, and especially now, my responsibility as like a Latino writer, Latinx writer, also a queer writer, like all the intersections of identity that can come together. Making the focal point be as broad and fun that many different types of actors and characters can come together and seeing that fun clash was really interesting to me, especially when it comes to class. I think sometimes we forget these, categories we're all put in and identities that we're all separated into. I think class is such a unifying one that I really was interested in exploring that crosses sexuality and race. I was really interested in seeing that common language of class within characters of different races and gender identities and sexuality. So I was like, well, let's see that. We don't get to hang out with that conversation too much. So let me approach it that way. So that for me was sort of my artistic little motor there. And kind of like Vanessa, I forgot what the original question was, but I went somewhere else. I hope it was useful. Remind me if I didn't address it, but I'm happy to keep indulging other tangents.
No, in these sorts of spaces, I think the tangents are important because I think what is this whole event called? It's not anything except Meet the Playwrights. And I think that we just want to peer into your brains and into your souls, artistic souls. So wherever you go, it's going to work well for us because we just want to meet and sort of discuss. And so as you start talking more about thematics and lived experience and what that does to a work, would love to sort of ask you, Khulud, what aspects of your journey or your experience, even as a director coming into this project, really have influenced your approach to the process, but also the product?
Yeah, here it goes. I'm sorry. I tend to, so of course I'm influenced greatly by non-Western aesthetics in my work because I did not grow up here. I was born and raised in Damascus, and then I traveled around the world in different places. And a lot of the work that I do is extremely physical, and I look for that theatricality. I also happen to have a background in filmmaking. So I think finding that, like, there is something about transitioning from film to theater, which usually people do the opposite way. I did myself the favor of coming from the place that makes money more to the thing that makes money less. So, but something major I learned in that transition is that when we're doing work for film, the measurement unit is the shot, right? And when you're doing it for theater, your measurement unit is the scene. So how do you do the work as cleanly of a shot as film work and yet as theatrical as a scene work, as in that expensive way, is really where I dance and where I look for the work and I look for to achieve in my directing style. I also value a lot that sort of emotional journey, taking the audience on an emotional journey that dances between laughter and tears. I try to find like at least a moment of that in my work often. I like that moment of panic where we are so, in both between laughter and tears and comedy and tragedy, like hold hands on stage and take a dance. But of course, if it like that moment doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. But I look for that kind of balance, and I think that's greatly influenced by the kind of life I lived, as well as being someone who I think I like making jokes a lot.
That's great. That's beautiful. And so to just sort of think about even pulling the piece in which you said you weren't influenced because you weren't raised in a Western environment, I'd love to just hear from y'all to deviate a little bit from the present work and talk about sort of this process, because I think we can authentically, transparently say, even to Venezia's points about identity and being defined by theater and the theater world or the powers that be, that a lot of Western theater, whether it be in the canon or in process or practice, is very oppressive, racist, and dehumanizing. And you all are representative of these different backgrounds, experiences, and stories. What has been different about a commission like this? And maybe in contrast to some of the other sort of experiences that you may or may not have had in other spaces where there is a little bit more of a weight or an expectation. Is that resonating at all? So yeah, feel free to jump in and just talk a little bit about what about this process has been different, if it has been, hopefully. Yeah.
I know for me, it's been really empowering and awesome to just share the space with Tony and Catherine. And, at the beginning, compromise, there was never, in my opinion, an issue on the table. Everything was pretty seamless between us. And I felt an immense amount of support from both of them, and being able to not be the only person of color in the room, because I've been in the room where I'm the writer, maybe the directors of color, because I typically insist, and the actors, but then everybody else is not. But it was actually really awesome to be around other writers of color, and then, but not just of color, like of different experiences. And I like being around different people. I like learning from different people. And I really think this is such an awesome opportunity because of that. I've never been able to work with a director from Syria before. I've never been in the same room as an Asian writer. That it honestly, and I've been in enough rooms where that probably shouldn't be the case. So I think what Thronestone is doing is very unique in that sense, that there was an intention to not just be like, we're gonna do diversity on paper, but like choosing a group of really cool artists that could, challenge each other. And I'm gaining something. I don't feel like I'm just, on a poster for a company to feel, better about themselves.
That's beautiful. Yeah, would anyone else like to speak to that? I think it's important. Yeah, go ahead, Catherine.
I think it was the first time I was in a group a room of artists where everyone was bilingual or had another heritage that they grew up with. And that was very cool and reassuring because sometimes, I don't know, it's just harder to explain your work if everyone's from one particular culture and no one else is from the culture you're from, and they don't understand that you walk like two worlds or two languages or anything like that.
It's really powerful. Yeah, Tony, anything on that for you, just in terms of just American theater, and we know the racism and oppression that's present in those spaces, and how this has been empowering it for you in some way?
Yeah, I mean, two thoughts come to mind. First, just like a huge shout out to Thronestone. This was like that's how it was sold to me from the start. You know, I was the first writer, but Jonathan Wynn was very specific in that this was the project, was engaging with our perspectives and centering that, right? And of course, my first thought was like, oh, okay, you want writers of color, but like, do you have, you know, the actors to do it, the directors to do it? You know, immediately that was my, you know, like, I don't want to have to end up writing like a all white play because those are the only actors that are available. So it's been just like, it was just nice that they just reassured that that our point of view and the characters that we write about specifically were centered, and that was a priority. So it was very liberating to do that. And yeah, in terms of like how that has been in conversation with the larger world, I think what's been really refreshing for me working with the group here tonight is they're all just like really smart artists first and foremost. And I really appreciate that what we're doing is so subversive and surprising and innovative. And none of us are, you know, to be a little provocative, right? I think sometimes as a writer of color, we also inherit the stereotypes that are told to us about who we are. And there are some artists that sometimes subscribe to that we are sort of just, though we are the authors of it, we're also kind of, you know, continuing this legacy of what the perceptions are of our bodies. So I can definitely attest, none of us are doing that in our work. And I know that I'm sure we're not doing that not only in our work outside, but obviously in the work that we're doing together collaboratively. So it's just refreshing. You know, sometimes you feel as a writer, especially, it can be, you know, you're in your room, you're on your laptop writing your work. So it has been really, really cool to sort of acknowledge I'm not the only one. You know, it can be very lonely sometimes when you're fighting this fight, this crusade of like shattering stereotypes and perceptions. So it is really, really galvanizing to sort of be in arms literally with these other artists in the ways that we're all sort of fighting the same fight together.
Yeah, and I think it's really special, you know, as you all talk about this experience, because I think it's so vital to be thinking about what empowerment and what liberation looks like, and also acknowledging that as artists, whether you're directing or you're writing or even acting, normally in spaces like these, you're the token or the exception. And there is this pressure to take those stereotypes, as you said, and shatter them, but also affirm your culture and your validity and your worth, while also being a mouthpiece. Because it's almost like you're in the room, you only get one shot and to speak for everyone that is supposedly standing behind you because we let you in here. And what does it look like when you're able to just make the art that you want to make? And yes, it may have some of those themes and those messages, but that's not what you've been brought here for. And I think that lifting that up is really important, because I feel like sometimes too often these cycles continue when we force artists such as yourselves to inauthentically talk about your experiences in your work and restrict you from just making the art that you want to make. So with that, and just want to remind our listeners, you can definitely throw some questions and thoughts into our Q&A, and we're about to shift into that in just a moment. But I hope you all have enjoyed our.
Can I add a little something, which is that you brought beautifully the element of like being hired and expecting perfectionism, you know, expecting to be perfect. It's like we have this one chance, and then you're like, it seems like, okay, here you go, we gave you the chance and please impress us, you know. And I really value that this experience has not been that. I really value the togetherness of this team. I'm really grateful for how sensitive and how resilient this space is from all the fantastic playwrights, and listening and taking in and trying again, and listening and taking in and trying again. And same from the leadership of the company, because it's just, how else are we going to grow? Like, we talk about safe space, but I also want to bring up the resilient space where we do make mistakes and we acknowledge them and we take accountability and apologize about them. And this is really like the exciting conversation when we get to those places, when we get to have those conversations and those collaborations with other artists of different backgrounds and different voices. And naturally we'll make mistakes because, like, of course, it definitely takes a great amount of patience to be in the not knowing seat. So I raise my hand as one of the people who are like working on that skill myself. I like knowing, but I'm getting better at not knowing. And this team has done nothing but empower that voice even more for me. And I'm so grateful.
Wow, that's really beautiful. So I have a couple more sort of questions and thoughts, and then we'll shift into the Q&A, as there's some folks in there who have some questions and some thoughts. Some have to be dismissed, but we'll still sort of roll with what we can. So I just wanted to ask that, as a part of this sort of process and this project, what do you hope the audience that engages with this work, whether virtually or in person, from your piece and your perspective, what do you hope they walk away with? And anyone can jump in when you feel ready, because I know that's a weighty question, but don't feel pressured to give the singular right answer. You could say something and then later be like, actually, I don't know. That's not what I want. It could change tomorrow,
I think one thing I noticed, and to anyone watching, I'm so sorry if my voice, I'm just a little sniffly, but one thing I noticed in the past year with the George Floyd movement and the Black Lives Matter uprisings that happened last summer is that for a lot of people who felt frustrated by what they saw, there was like, we're reading all these books, we are on it, we've got this, we are ending racism in 3 months. And then they're hit this point where a lot of people are like, I'm exhausted. Why am I still seeing certain things happening? Why is this going, what's going on? Why isn't racism over? And to me, as someone who felt feelings before, summer of 2020, I knew that it wasn't that, we were still going to have conflict. And we have a lot of questions and conversations that need to happen. There's a lot of conversations that aren't happening. And for me, my hope is that for anyone in the audience who feels tired, because we're all tired, this is exhausting. Regardless of how you feel or who you are, it is very exhausting. I can't, we're all exhausted. Anyone who's feeling a sense of exhaustion, my goal is to present an alternative to that exhaustion. And I don't want to say too much because I don't like giving spoilers, but I think that's enough.
Yes, love that so much. Yeah, I'm definitely trying to avoid spoilers. Like I said, this event's called Meet the Playwrights, so it's about getting insight, and then we'll say a couple things that'll hopefully make folks want to go see the work. But we're doing our part. All right. Would anyone else like to speak to a takeaway that you hope that your audience or who you had in mind when you were writing, that you hope is impacted by this work? Catherine, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I put certain words in my play for people to think about, like who gets to decide what's classical, who gets to decide what gets preserved by history, things like that. And I won't say further. You'd have to see the play to see what happens.
Great. And then Tony, then Khulud on this one.
Yeah, I mean, just for the word that I've read of Catherine's and Vanessa's, it's just what I really just admire is that we're all having real conversations about identity, about race, about class. But I think what I really celebrate is that none of them are in a white guilt, white gaze space. that we're not catering to that. We're not interested in that space. That, it's just so refreshing to have conversations, big conversations again about race that isn't just about, beating up an audience, which sometimes I think white audience members might feel they're walking into if it's an artist of color's work. Like, oh, I'm just going to be made to feel bad for all these things that I can't control in the world. And it's, that circumstance is real. But how do we have a different conversation that's the same subject matter, but just doing something different aesthetically or with content or the characters that we're centering? So I'm most excited about that because I've already seen that in the work so far, is that we are not shy about what we're interested in as artists and in our work. But the tactics are just different. I've heard a lot, I read a lot of, just what's going on in like film as well. Sort of a new movement, about anti-trauma, that our bodies and our work doesn't always have to center on the trauma of our experiences. And I think that's a really refreshing conversation, because that's been so much of my own mission statement for a while. The Latinx experience can get reductive, can get trauma-centric. So how do we expand beyond that and show different characters, different experiences that, are living the reality of these things sometimes, but it doesn't have to just sort of be myopically just about that thing. So I'm excited that I think all of our plays are doing that really beautifully and elegantly and theatrically and joyfully as well.
Beautiful. Awesome. So we just want to honor sort of the way that we're moving, and there's some questions in here that I would love to lift up. So I'm going to go in reverse order, and we'll take one person, I guess, to represent the group, right? Don't you hate that? One person has to represent per question, but if you have other thoughts, feel free to chime in. I'm kidding. So someone asked, what have you learned during this process that surprised you the most, either about yourself, Ridgefield, or something else entirely? So would anyone like to share what's something that you learned about Ridgefield, yourself, or something else in the process?
I learned that this was Eugene O'Neill, the playwright. Even though his center is not located in Ridgefield, Ridgefield was his favorite city, and he wished that he moved here. So I thought that was a cool random fact in my research.
That's awesome. Cool. So a little fun fact. Then another question is, what are usually your favorite parts of collaboration, and what has been your favorite part of maybe this collaboration? So collaboration in general, but then what's been your favorite part of this collaboration? Tony, you want to take a stab at that one?
I mean, just the fact that it's even happening at all, it's just such a marvel to me, right? We've all been on pause for such a while about when we get to really kind of create and intellectually engage with someone else's art, or to have someone else engage with yours. So you're not sort of in this echo chamber of like, what, am I doing this right? Is this what I meant? So that feels just so refreshing to have that space again, and to hold space like that for others, and to celebrate others. It's my favorite thing about collaboration is just like questions being asked, or what someone took away from something that perhaps you meant or didn't mean. It's always exciting to see that and to have that. So we're at that stage now where actually we're about to engage with actors too in our work. We're going to do some workshops. So I love actors. I love their insights. I love designers. I for my piece specifically, very costume heavy. So I can't wait to talk to the costume designer and be like, what are you going to do with this, and just sort of get their insights into the storytelling and the aesthetic quality of what's happening. So I'm over the moon about future collaboration, about what's about to happen with other artists and what they bring to the table, because it's just been a while. So I'm really excited to see that, and to be hopefully in person soon as well to do that work, which is obviously.
That's beautiful. Love that. All right, next question from our audience is the We See You WAT document demands theater immediately employ at all levels 50% BIPOC persons. How does that impact how you write plays? Do you have any other observations about the document? So is everyone familiar with that document? Have you seen it? So Blue, I see you shaking your head. So would you like to talk a little bit from your perspective? Any thoughts on the document, and how does it impact like your approach to theater?
Absolutely. I think I really, first of all, like the fact that there are artists who sat together to create this document and to have this conversation and to do this work wow, like how much we needed that and how much work went into that free labor that they are not paid for, that they did so much work on, regardless of where you stand with it, or do you agree with some stuff and disagree with some stuff, naturally, of course. But I really value so much how, like, in so many conversations, like prioritizing the human, like, let's not work 12 out of 10 out of 12, like, let's not kill ourselves as we're making a play. Let's prioritize the human. How do we make sure like there is paid leave for people who, like, how do we honor people with families? How do we make sure it's not like I want to live or I want to make a career in theater? I value so much in that conversation, and I was so grateful. I was really also grateful not to dive into the negative, but it was like, when you experience racism from theaters, and especially if you're like in a place isolated, in a place like Arkansas, and you're like, am I crazy? Because you've been gaslit so much. So it just really helps to see your experience amplified in a document like this, to see, like, we saw you when you did this. We saw you when you applied for a grant, for example, under like a specific identity, and then that all went to your operational budget. And anyways, but like that was really helpful for me, and I was really grateful for that work, and I was really like, oh, I'm not crazy. Good.
That's so beautiful. Cool. So we're going to get to sort of the tail end of our conversation. And so with that, I think it would just be appropriate to get one more question that I see from our audience, and then I'll kind of pivot us to our conclusion. I feel like I could talk to y'all for many hours, and we might have to set that up when you kind of workshop or come visit, and we can just hang out, spend some time. So thank you all for sharing little snippets of your minds, of the ways that you create and think. So I heard a little bit from Tony's perspective of looking forward to working with actors and working with costumes. Catherine, from your perspective, what are you most looking forward to with the production?
I think I'm looking forward to working with the director and actors in a room. Whenever I hear the work out loud for the first time, it's like my brain goes on fire and there's all these new ideas that happen. So that's always the part that I'm really grateful for in the process. Yeah, so similar to other people.
Yeah, it's really great. And I feel like that's what the beauty of work like this is, right? It's living, it's breathing, it's going to evolve and take shape. And so I guess I'm also curious, without spoilers, because we don't like spoilers. We want people to be surprised and encounter the work. I would love to just ask our director, without giving anything away, I guess logistically, what should audience members expect? Are they coming into a space? Are they outside? Are they going in one place? Is there a screen? Like what should audiences expect to sort of experience overall?
Yeah, so it's a roving production at 3 different sites. It's all happening outdoors, and we start with one play, and then we move together to the second play, and we move to the third play, the third location, and we're really still playing with the idea of like, what does even moving mean? Like, what does stillness mean? Like, those are really questions I'm interested in exploring. And I'm also really interested in exploring how is the audience as well as the team, the performers, occupying the space? Like, is it most useful to occupy it horizontally or like vertically or diagonally? Like, I'm really interested in that kind of conversation and space. What does being in the space mean, and what does emptiness versus presence mean, as well as stillness and movement mean?
Beautiful. So I feel as though what's really, really incredible is that the suburbs is this conglomeration of ideas, perspectives, characters, space, time, all centered in Ridgefield. So audiences should expect to encounter these seamlessly intertwined yet distinct stories and experiences and moving in time and in space. So it's a little bit of a time travel spatial experiment, which is great from these three different vantage points and these three different playwrights. So as we wrap up, would love to just go around and give everyone just a quick moment to share with us briefly what is your hope for the American theater as you think about works like this? Vanessa, I love your reaction. Like, oh, what is your hope for the universe? I'm joking. But yeah, what is your hope for the American theater as you've been working through this work? Because I'm assuming that based on what you all do, even out the other work you've done outside of this, you're constantly thinking about this larger conversation and feeling like this is a microcosm of what could happen in the future. So if everyone could just share just briefly from your perspective, what's your hope? Anyone want to start first? Vanessa, are you ready?
You know, you called on me and I'm like, oh goodness. I guess my hope for the American theater is economic equity. I think economic equity in terms of how much money theaters are getting. You know, Thornstone is a wonderful theater that's doing a lot more with, you know, considerably less than what other people do. And so that's a question. Why are smaller theaters where, you know, people who are running it have day jobs? Why are they doing more in terms of equity and making sure everybody's paid and, you know, working with everyone than, you know, major theater companies all over the US? Financially, I think one of the biggest conversations and critiques of We See White American Theater was that there were artists who didn't understand the financial experiences of artists who may have not, you know, worked a Broadway job or may have not had those experiences. So I think we can never forget how much people are being paid because everybody is valuable in theater. And, you know, we're losing so many great talent. I mean, there's so many actors who left theater during the pandemic. There's so many playwrights who left theater. We're losing talent left and right because it's not sustainable to work in theater. And that means we're excluding people by design. So, you know, who do we want people to stay? Is this what we want? I don't think so. I'd love to see a theater where people are able to stay, you know? I would love that.
Beautiful. Thanks so much. Tony, over to you.
I mean, the funny answer for me is I just hope people retire, to be very honest. I think it's just time. There's a lot of leadership that needs to just make space. I mean, these are the conversations we've been having for a year, right? It's like, oh, I want to be an advocate. I want to help artists and people of color. What can I do? And I think sometimes the hardest thing to do is to make space, is sometimes to remove yourself from that. And it's really not that hard. You know, as a man, I can own my maleness and be like, there are spaces where I dominate and I need to get out of the way sometimes, you know, to make room for women and to own that and to, you know, whatever. It's like not a big deal. It's really not that hard to do. So I think there's a lot of fear happening. Like, well, if I, you know, what's going to happen to my theater? What's going to happen to my community if I'm not there leading it forward? It's going to continue because theater will continue to happen in whatever shape, form it always has and adapted to. So yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of structures that need to be shaken up. And I think, and I hope people are looking inward at themselves and sort of saying, I think maybe it's time to get out of the way, to be very, very honest.
Beautifully said. Catherine?
For me, I hope that in the future there's more room for new stories and new structures, and that we don't keep telling the same stories about particular identities over and over again, that we can expand what we think of what a particular culture or identity looks like and move forward from that. I just see a lot of similar, I think it's like some theaters think there's a certain way to tell a particular person's story, and that's what keeps getting done over and over again, but there's so much more. So just more creativity and more celebration of the imagination in theater.
Love it. Love it. All right, Chloe?
I mean, how do I follow after these fantastic wishes, first of all? But okay, I'm gonna be that person who says this. I wanted to not have it connected to capitalism. If we wanted to be successful, I don't think capitalism is the way to making art. I think that puts the people who have the money at a place of power. And in a very similar way, that's like the dictatorship of money. I'm sorry to say it, but it's very similar to that. So I think until we take that power away from, with gratefulness and with grace and with the process, but I would love to see a different economical system for doing theater that is not capitalist and does not, because like we are as artists of different backgrounds, we're being asked to coin our identities. You know what I mean? And I see my identity as the gold at all times. It's not something that is high now and low later because the currency went up or down. It will always be gold. So I want to deconnect it from that sort of conversation in terms of, you know, making my identity a currency. So that's really the conversation I'm having between me and me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. I hope that you had fun and that there was joy and that you got a little bit of inspiration if you were listening in. But once again, I want to say a special thank you to Ridgefield Library and Thronestone Theater. Tickets are on sale. So if you want to see and experience this show, please go to thronestone.org and check out all the information of how to get tickets. It has a little bit more of a synopsis about sort of the overall work, but we really tonight just wanted to have a conversation amongst artists to talk about identity, process, and experience with all of this. And what a beautiful way to end with just thinking about the hopes of these phenomenal artists who are primarily human beings that we want to treasure, we want to take care of, and we want to honor for not their continual output, but just the fact that they're alive and that they're creating, and that's really, really special. So let's continue to honor one another, take care of one another, take care of space, because it's a space for people, and make art. And let's see what we can do to revolutionize the process and develop a new canon. But, you know, making space at the table, and we need a table. My first thought is let's break the table, and also that there's other furniture. Maybe we don't want to sit at a table, right? I think there's this obsession with a table, but I'm like, what about a couch or a tub? I don't know. There's other furniture, right? So I hope you walk away thinking that there is other furniture. Let's not discriminate, right, against other types of furniture. But no, thank you all so much, Kalud, Catherine, Vanessa, and Tony. Clap it up from where you are just to honor these wonderful voices. And we hope that you continue to stay tuned for everything that Thronestone is doing, but also follow their careers because we just want to continue to support and uplift their work. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me. And I hope that y'all have a great night and a wonderful weekend. Till next time. Peace out.